Hello, and welcome to Talkin' Tales, where we share stories about our animal companions, their unique personalities, their zany antics, and the heartbreak of saying goodbye. I'm your host, Paul Barnett. Welcome to episode 4. Today, I'm going to continue the story of two very special ferrets, Dodger and Ace. If you missed part 1 of their story, you'll find that in episode 3 of our podcast. Picking up where that episode left off, Ace was about to become a bionic ferret. His surgery day couldn't come fast enough. The tumor on his jaw was growing rapidly. His regular vet provided some relief for Ace with pain medication and a minor procedure to remove a couple of teeth that had essentially become part of the tumor. However, by August of 2019, the tumor was so large that it was impacting Ace's ability to eat. At several points, the tumor started to bleed. At one point, I had to rush him back to the vet to get help getting the bleeding to stop. I was concerned that Ace might not make it to his surgery day. The day before surgery, I received a call that the surgery was being postponed a few days due to a surgical support staff vacation. Thankfully, Ace held on, though the bleeding was becoming more frequent and the tumor looking even scarier. It was now surgery day. I took Ace to the clinic and waited with him in the lobby while the staff prepared for the procedure. The doctor came out to me and sat down and said that on the last scan they did, he saw some small tumors in his lower body. He asked if I wanted to proceed with the surgery given this new information. I suspected the tumors might be an early indicator of insulinoma or adrenal disease, which are both treatable, and so I said yes. The nurse took Ace back. I waited in the lobby for a while, then drove over to Ace's regular vet and helped out with some small office tasks. I needed a distraction while I waited for news on Ace. So many things could go wrong, and I knew that when my phone rang, it could be devastating news. After what seemed like days, but was just a couple of hours, my phone rang. It was the surgeon. The surgery was complete and had been a success. Ace was slowly waking up and would be able to go home at the end of the day, which at this point was several hours away. When he was ready to go home, I picked him up and took him to my regular vet for a short visit. He had stitches on the left side of what was left of his jaw. The left side of his face and part of his neck had been shaved for the surgery. He didn't look his best, but he was alive and able to begin recovery. The doctor gave me a couple of medications and clear instructions that Ace was to have only soup for the next 2 weeks, and he would need a post-surgery follow-up in 10 days. Ace understandably slept when we got home. Once he woke, I made him a small bowl of soup, which he ate. He was isolated in a single-level cage to keep him from too much movement or activity while he healed. During evening playtime for the ferrets, everyone rushed over to the cage to see Ace, even his canine and feline brothers and sisters. Over the next couple of weeks, he showed a good appetite and his face was clearly healing. At his checkup, the surgeon was very pleased with how well everything had healed. In fact, there was no drift with the remaining right side of Ace's jaw. It was staying in place. The surgeon said Ace could begin transitioning back to solid food. I was to offer him softened kibble for another week or so, and if he tolerated that, then he could have normal dry crunchy kibble again. The surgeon also convinced me that putting Ace through another major surgery to implant the replacement jaw was not a good idea. That procedure was deemed unnecessary given how well Ace was adjusting. Ace became proficient at eating his kibble with only half of a jaw. He would select pieces with his jaw and move them to the right side of the bowl, and then lift them into his mouth and chew with just the right side. It didn't take long before he was back to just solid, dry kibble, though I still gave him a little bit of soup that he shared with his brother Dodger. Things were looking up. And then the unimaginable happened. But first, I want to rewind a bit. When Dodger was sick, I imagined a pink healing light around him. As we discussed in part 1, Dodger had a disease called DIM that took 2 swipes at him, but he overcame it both times. One day, while at work in September of 2019, I received a notification on my smartwatch. It was an image from the camera that I had in the ferret cage where Dodger and Ace slept. I would get images when the camera detected motion, which was pretty rare during the day. The image had a bright pink light on it that was filling most of the view. That's odd, I thought, but went about my day. At the end of the workday, I drove home as usual. I was prepared to do my normal evening routine of feeding the dogs and cats, letting the dogs out into the yard for a bit, preparing medications and soup for those ferrets who needed it, and checking and refilling the food and water bowls in the ferret cages. I had barely started this when I glanced over at the ferret cage where Dodger and Ace and a bunch of their siblings slept. I saw Dodger in the litter box, which wasn't too surprising. What I wasn't expecting was that as I walked over to the cage, Dodger didn't leave the litter box. While not a common occurrence, since the litter box was clean, I assumed he had fallen asleep in it. I watched him for a moment. He wasn't breathing. I reached in and touched him. His body was cold. My Dodger was gone. Those who know me know that I'm generally soft-spoken and virtually never raise my voice. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I let out a scream. I had never really screamed before in my life. I almost fell to my knees. My little man, who had battled a horrible disease and survived twice, left unexpectedly. I begged the universe to send him back. I demanded it. But those demands seemingly fell on deaf ears. I was now worried about Ace. Ace was asleep in a barrel, just a foot away from Dodger's body. Ace had just come through major life-changing surgery, and while he was mostly healed, he was still adjusting to life with half of a jaw. And now his best friend, his brother, who had been with him through all of their challenges, was gone. I somehow went into autopilot mode and made sure everyone got what they needed for the evening, but I don't remember anything else about that evening. Over the next few months, as we all adjusted to life without Dodger, Ace finished healing and became an expert at eating solid kibble with half a jaw. He had a healthy appetite and maintained a healthy weight. During a ferret photo shoot fundraiser, the photographer's assistant, who was also a vet tech, discovered a hard lump on the side of Ace's neck, near where he had surgery. I immediately scheduled an appointment for Ace. It appeared that the mass was not connected to anything, so the doctor suggested it might be an artifact left over from his surgery. The doctor was able to make a tiny incision on the side of Ace's neck and remove the mass without incident. Ace was back to his normal self just hours later. In the spring of 2020, though, another mass appeared in the same place, and it brought friends. We consulted with an oncologist who recommended electrochemotherapy, which would hopefully put a stop to any new growths. The procedure would need to be done shortly after the latest masses were removed. Ace was scheduled for another minor procedure with his regular vet to remove the new masses, and then scheduled for electrochemotherapy about 2 weeks later. Unfortunately, by the day of his procedure, new masses were once again growing, and so the procedure had to be postponed and we would need to try again. In May of 2020, a new ferret joined my family. He was about a year old. He had a name, but he didn't respond to it, and neither the shelter director nor I cared for the name, so I was tasked with coming up with a new name for this little man. It took a couple of days, but I determined a fitting name for him: Omni. When I brought him home, I let him explore a bit on his own. All of his new siblings were asleep in their cages. Omni decided to go into one of the cages. He went into the one where Ace was sleeping. He climbed up to the second level where Ace was, climbed into the hammock with Ace, and wrapped himself around Ace the same way Dodger used to. Usually when there's a new ferret, everyone has to investigate and sniff and figure out who the invader is. No one did that. In fact, Ace woke up briefly, looked at Omni, and went back to sleep. It was as if they knew each other. That evening, I let everyone out for playtime. As I was cleaning up medications, I heard metal clanging. I peered over the side of the counter to see Omni grabbing the top of the pet water fountain and dragging it across the floor, making a bit of a mess. I cleaned up the water and moved the fountain. I hadn't had to move the fountain since Dodger left. As I'm cleaning up, I hear the robotic floor cleaner start up. I look over, and there was Omni poking at its buttons. He took it for a short joyride. Omni had a lot of energy and clearly wanted to play. But this was now two things he did that no other ferret in my family did, except for Dodger. I decided to interact with Omni, so I reached down to let him grab my hand, or so that I could pick him up. He ran towards me, and just as I reached for him, he dodged my hand. This was too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence. Over the next weeks and months, these scenes played out repeatedly. Omni was behaving like Dodger. I told the story to a friend from the ferret shelter, who jokingly said, "Well, that was rude of Dodger to take over Omni's body," and then suggested maybe it was only temporary. Ace had another procedure to remove the masses from his neck, and then he had electrochemotherapy. This seemed to work. No new masses were growing on his neck. All was well again for the next several months. In early September of 2020, Ace and his sister Kyra had checkups. Kyra had been battling lymphoma, and I hope to cover her story on a future episode. There was a bit of a lump developing on the side of Ace's neck, but it was nowhere near as big as before, and it had been months. Ace had also been favoring his left leg in the last few weeks. He hadn't been injured in my presence, but perhaps he slept on it wrong, or bumped it in his cage when I wasn't home. The doctor did an X-ray. After an unusually long delay, the doctor came out to talk to me and show me the X-ray. It was an X-ray of Ace's full body. The back half, covering his lower body, was riddled with white dots. The doctor gave me the devastating news that these were tumors. There was a larger one attached to his spine near his left leg, which explained the limp. None of the tumors were large enough to be felt externally. There was nothing we could do. The doctor advised me to take Ace home and love him, and watch for signs that he was ready to be freed from his failing body. Devastated and inconsolable, I took Ace home. Over the next several weeks, his left leg worsened, but Ace was a trooper. He didn't let that slow him down. He explored and climbed during playtime. He ate his kibble and his soup with enthusiasm. He grew closer to his sister Smidget and his brother Milo. They all hung out together and enjoyed soup together. He cuddled with Omni every night, just like he used to do with Dodger. We had a special photo shoot with Ace, Omni, and Milo. We knew it wouldn't be much longer for Ace, and that he likely wouldn't be around for the next photo shoot fundraiser. I made each of them their own little hat to wear, and Ace's hat had a little picture of Dodger on it. The photographer had to be particularly gentle with Ace, as his bones were now fragile, and any of them could break at any time. A couple of weeks after the photo shoot, the light disappeared from Ace's eyes. He no longer ate his kibble or his soup with enthusiasm. He was now clearly in pain trying to move around. I was hoping that this might be just an off day for him. I talked to his doctor and tentatively scheduled his final vet visit for 2 days away, hoping I would be able to cancel it because Ace perked up. It was not meant to be. On November 19th, 2020, I took Ace, along with his brothers Omni and Milo, to Ace's final vet appointment. At approximately 2:10 p.m., I held Ace in my arms and cried as the doctor helped him out of his body. My Ace was now healthy and whole again, but his human was heartbroken. Omni and Milo also said goodbye to their brother. It was then that I remembered what my friend said months earlier about Omni acting like Dodger. What if it was only temporary? What if Dodger was here to be with Ace and help him on to his next journey? I picked up Omni. I looked into his very familiar eyes and called him Dodger. I told him that I loved him and understood if he had to leave. Heartbroken, I took Omni and Milo home. We all took a much-needed nap for the remainder of the afternoon. When evening playtime came, it felt wrong not to prepare soup and medications for Ace. When Omni came out to play, there was no metal clanging at the water fountain. Omni didn't seem interested in it. The robotic floor cleaner sat idle, untouched. I walked over to Omni and reached down. Omni jumped into my hand. He did not dodge it. And every day since then, Omni has not demonstrated a single Dodger-like behavior. A few footnotes to add here. First, the day after Ace left, Smidget, Milo, and Omni all slept in funny positions in their cage. While ferrets tend to sleep in funny positions that look uncomfortable to us humans, these were particularly odd and unlike any ferret positions I've seen. I took a photo and stared at it. One could argue that it could be me grieving or seeing what I wanted to see. But Smidget was sleeping on her side in an almost tent-like position, with her front paws touching her knees. It was basically the shape of the letter A. Milo was hanging half out of his hammock and pointing in the opposite direction, partially curled in what appeared to be the shape of the letter C. Omni was laying next to him, almost straight, with his arms out in front of him, in the rough shape of the letter E. Second, when searching online for ideas for a memorial for Dodger, I came across a thread in an online forum titled Jon Snow the Dodger. I mentioned earlier that I was tasked with choosing a new name for the ferret who would become known as Omni. His original name was Jon Snow. One final footnote to add. Minutes after I posted part 1 of this story to the podcast feed, I played a couple of rounds of a popular word game. In the first round, part of the available letters on my rack of tiles spelled out the word dodges. In the second round, moments later, part of the available letters spelled out aces, both in order. That might have been coincidence, or perhaps someone was saying hello. I've never met two ferrets who were as close as Dodger and Ace, who fought so hard through their diseases, and yet were seemingly happy ferrets despite all of the challenges life handed them. I miss them every day, and I will never forget them. And that concludes the story of Dodger and Ace, at least for now. If you'd like to share a story about a special pet, visit us at talkandtalespodcast.com or reach out to us on Twitter at talkandtales. That's TALKINTAILS, or on Facebook at facebook.com/talkandtales. If you'd like to support the show, you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/talkandtales.